A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
You might have been following the rise in anti-Semitism all around Australia. It's been fuelled by the war between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East. Jewish Australians have been terrorised by the activities of anti-Semitic activists. Well, some have been wondering, where are the churches in all of this? Are they being silent, turning a blind eye to a rising tide? Or are they standing in solidarity with the Jewish people? The Reverend David Baker is the General Secretary of the Queensland Churches Together. They've written an open letter to the Jewish community. David Baker, welcome to 2020.
Thank you very much, Neil.
David, a letter about the Jewish community to the Jewish community. How do you describe it?
Well, it's really quite, I think, a heartfelt letter of solidarity. The idea came to a gathering of heads of churches a couple of weeks ago, and it was taken up with great alacrity by that group. And it was actually Archbishop Mark Coleridge, the Catholic Archbishop, who penned that letter on behalf of the churches that signed up for it. And it's just the sense that I think we're shocked at what we're seeing happening in an Australian community that historically has been cohesive and respectful. And to think that the Jewish community, which has contributed so much to the richness of our common life here in Australia, is being treated in the way that it is. I think there was a bit of a delay in Queensland because it seemed a lot of it was happening, down south. But as soon as the suggestion was made, the heads of churches took it up enthusiastically and wanted to be a part of it, because we wanted to communicate that sense of solidarity to the Jewish community from the Christian community. As you
say, Queensland up until now has been largely spared some of these more severe attacks, anti-Semitic attacks. But there is a sense, isn't there, that when you've got a Churches Together movement that you lead, when it makes a statement, it's making a statement really denominationally, which is a national thing as well. How significant is it? Because we're talking a Queensland letter, but it's meaningful, isn't it, right across states and territories all around Australia?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I realise, I think there were Catholic and Anglican leaders in Sydney made some, and Orthodox leaders made very clear statements a week or so ago. And I think there were some church leaders in Western Australia who also were starting to speak up. I think, really in the background, there's been good friendships and good relationships. So the person-to-person support from church leaders to leaders in the Jewish community has always been there. But I think there was just this realisation, it's got to come out in the public. We've got to say something to the Jewish community, but so that the whole of the Queensland community hears it, because it's reached that tipping point of deep concern, and I know many people are just concerned about what's going on with our multicultural Australia, that this is manifest amongst us.
So many of us will be heartened that the leaders of our denominations who do sit around the table and talk together and do initiate projects together are actually doing something very proactive here. And of course, the downside is to even need to mention the ancient and irrational hatred that lurks deep in the national psyche. And those are some words out of the letter. Just needing to acknowledge what the problem is. There's something a little bit deeply ingrained, isn't there?
Well, it is interesting, and it was Archbishop Mark that made the comment. He'd lived in Europe for quite some time, and he said, and I think as Australians, we probably don't realise, some of the deep historic embedded anti-Semitism that is around the world, because we're egalitarian. We welcome people. We're open. We're transparent. I think reasonably so. We're young as a country, and and we just haven't been as aware as in some other places of how deeply entrenched anti-Semitism is. Now, it was a part of Europe, a part of Christian Europe for a long, long time, and we're still, that's still washing its way out. And so I think Archbishop Mark particularly had a deeper sense of it because of his broader experience across the world and living in different places. But I think for people like me, I'm born and bred Queenslander, it just came as a shock. What the heck is going on?
And, when you've got political, secular commentators who have their take on what's going on, there's a dimension that comes from church leaders, and certainly honour to Archbishop Coleridge here and his crafting of the letter and the signature on there from the other church leaders. I mean, I'm just going to come into some of the wording in the letter for a moment. Yep. He says, we remember that demonic forces in the human psyche made of the Jewish people an innocent scapegoat, to bring into there a very definite spiritual attack in this is not what the secular media is reporting, and that's not what politicians are talking about, but it's coming from church leaders, David. Absolutely, and we have every responsibility to talk about this kind of thing in spiritual terms, because this is the what's being manifest is the absolute antithesis of the gospel, of the heritage that Christianity recognises. It's born out of Judaism. So there is a spiritual dimension to this that the Archbishop has rightly put his finger on, and it is that desire for all of us to put ourselves first before all others. That's a part of the nature of the human heart. And the gospel speaks to that and calls us to see in a wide range of, the diversity of the human race, brothers and sisters are made in the image of God. And that's what anti-Semitism attacks, the fact that we are made in the image of God, called to recognise one another's, our common identity as children of God. I can't help but notice another useful terminology in the letter that helps us understand issues around anti-Semitism and described as a plague, and a plague that lies dormant for years, but it then from time to time strikes, and you don't always see it coming. It does lend itself, doesn't it, to the thought that some level of vigilance ongoing is necessary to be able to keep on top of anti-Semitism. Oh, absolutely. And we are torn in a sense around, the freedom of speech is a very important thing in our Western culture. But freedom of speech should not protect incitement to violence. It should not protect incitement to hatred. And so these are the things that governments have to work through in a very challenging way and find balances around. But that idea of the bacillus, the idea of a germ, I think it was Solzhenitsyn that said, good and evil resides in every human heart. And that's the nature. That's the nature of the human. And when there's stress, when there's pressure in the external environment, in communities, it is in the nature of the human to find a scapegoat. And of course, Christian faith addresses that and says, repudiates that. But it is deeply within our psyche to find someone to blame and to persecute them. And that's what's kind of and that's what the Jewish community across the millennia have experienced. And I think it's really important to name that's a part of our human fallenness, and that the gospel addresses that very powerfully. David, have you had any feedback from the Jewish community? Because when you come in solidarity and the wording in the letter come to you with the antidote of solidarity and the balm of fraternity. Has there been any feedback from the Jewish community to the friendship of the Christian church?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been personal, it's been in the personal interactions of folk who I know on the Jewish Board of Deputies and I work with in interfaith spaces. It's certainly been a message of appreciation for the fact that we did the letter and the tone and the nature of the letter. That feedback's been very strong from the Jewish community.
And a wonderful way the letter ends too, that our prayers surround you, the Jewish community. May the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, the Father of Jesus, grant you protection and peace. There's this alignment, this is solidarity. The letter is, it just resounds with that. So you might say my congratulations on the letter that's been written and my thanks to everyone in those churches. Now, just give us a quick, in a nutshell, which churches are a part of the Queensland Churches Together that have signed this letter?
Well, it's a bit interesting, Neil. So there's a gathering in in Brisbane every couple of months and it's called loosely Heads of Churches. So that includes Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, Uniting, Salvation Army, Wesleyan Methodist, Baptist, INC, International Network, ACC, Churches of Christ. So that's an informal gathering of heads of churches hosted by Archbishop Mark. And we just gather for fellowship, open the scriptures together, pray together, and really just offer fraternal support to one another. And then there's Queensland Churches Together, which is an entity, and that membership is mainly the mainline Protestant church, Anglican, Catholic, Lutheran, Uniting, Salvation Army, and some of the Protestant tradition, some of the Orthodox traditions. So there's a little bit of a crossover between the two. But I would want to say to your listeners that the spirit of collaboration between the churches, whether they're formally members of Queensland Churches Together or not, is very strong. And it's been very strong for a long, long time. And I think it's a part of the nature of how we get along in Queensland. But it is also a gift of the heritage of church leaders over the last 100 years who have, in the midst of denominational rivalries and all that stuff and, Protestant Catholic sectarianism of previous years, have said, no, we are brothers and sisters together, and have manifested that in their relationships to one another. So it's a lovely gift that the church has in Queensland, and that current church leaders are nurturing and protecting.
And no doubt there are church members, listeners to our conversation now, that feel really empowered and encouraged to hear such strong words and words of solidarity coming from church leaders. The Reverend David Baker is the General Secretary of the Queensland Churches Together. You can connect with him. You can get insights about Queensland Churches Together at the website qct.org.au. QCT stands for Queensland Churches Together. David Baker, thanks so much for your insights today on 2020.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share, Neil. Much appreciated.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.